At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Thomas, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here, Dr. Doug. It's good. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, it's great. You're so lucky to have an easy last name. Brown. Try Gall Branson enough times and you'll realize why I go by Dr. Doug.
Yeah, I love it. I understand. Funny enough, like Thomas is my middle name and my first name is Chris. And for the longest time, I decided to go by my middle name once Chris Brown, the R&B singer, became a big name before he beat up his girlfriend at the time, Rihanna. But when I was in film school, every single time I would call up and order film, they would always make fun of me. So I was like, all right, I'm going by my middle name, going by Thomas.
I actually do that too. I noticed on my birth announcement, it was just call me Doug, but my first name's after my dad, Norman, but it was just always just call me Doug. So that's where I'm at too.
Right on. All right, we're on the same page with that.
Okay, so hey, I'd love for you to share with the audience your journey. I think that would be really tremendous for you to do that. And also talk a little bit about your book, but then we'll get into the contents a little bit later and really start talking about some things.
Well, I think like it's important to bring up the book because the book is about the journey.
Exactly.
Yeah. So my book is called 2012, A Bicycle Odyssey, 7,000-mile bicycle journey for suicide awareness and the healing power of art. So back in 2001, I lost my brother, Mark Brown, to suicide. And in roughly 2010, I had known about this guy, but I met a guy named Zach, and he lost his brother Sean to suicide, and I believe that was in 2006. And before I had met Zach, I had never known anybody who lost somebody to suicide. I probably knew a lot of people, but they hadn't shared it with me.
Right.
And it was just a little fortuitous of the connection between Zach and I. I was at the time we were both working for a parks department for a community park system. And I was working at the park that my brother had worked at when he died. And Zach and I had known about each other within the park system because it's like a small town. Everybody knows who everybody is, even if you don't work with them on a daily basis. But it wasn't until a day that Zach filled in to cover a shift for one of my coworkers that him and I really got a chance to know each other and talk. And I think we both took a shine to each other relatively early. Fast forward a couple of months, we decided to meet up and just get some coffee and hang out and get to know each other a little bit better. And he was reading a book that I had been reading. He was reading the second book in the Ishmael series by Daniel Quinn. I had just finished Ishmael, and I was reading The Story of B, which is the second book in the series, and he was reading my Ishmael. And so we had that to start our conversation with. And I really enjoyed Daniel Quinn's he really puts an emphasis on the importance of knowing your story, your personal story, a cultural story, a national story, a world story, the species story. Just a massive emphasis on it's like a level of self-awareness that I really appreciated. And so Zach, asked me, he had known that I'd been going through some emotional turmoil, and he asked me what it was. And even though this was about 9 years after my brother had died, I'd finally started going through therapy and working through that trauma and among other things that had shaped my life in a negative way. And so I told him about my brother and his suicide. A few hours go by, we're still hanging out, and he's like, hey, I just want to let you know my brother died of suicide too. And so we just had that connection that when you have a shared trauma with somebody, you don't really have to talk about it too much. It's like if you're having a bad day, you could just look at the person and they know some of the background that can contribute to that bad day. So it was just like this knowing, having somebody in my life and knowing about that pain was so helpful. I later found out that this is where the fortuitous stuff, not only did Zach and I, like, our friendship build, like really start at the place that my brother used to work at, but Zach and my brother shared the same birthday.
Oh, wow.
So it was like, we met each other at the place where my brother worked at. We were both reading the same book on the night that we really made a connection. And then he had the same birthday as my brother. And I knew at the time that, like, there was something to this friendship. It wasn't just about chasing women, playing basketball together and getting together and drinking beers. It was some a little bit deeper than this. And I was dating a woman at the time who was a pinup model for a online pinup for alternative beauty. It was called Suicide Girls. And it's just, women with tattoos, dyed hair, and piercings. And so I dubbed this woman and Zach my suicide friends, even though one was more of like this kind of like pretentious, edgy alternative beauty, and the other one was legitimate, like lost somebody to suicide. And this is where things get even weirder. Is that I was at the time I did a lot of photography on the side, and the woman asked me if I would shoot a Phoenix Suicide Girls community gathering. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do this. I don't really like club scenes or anything like that. It's not my speed, but I was doing it for her. Her and we had been seeing each other for a while, and I called Zach and I was like, hey man, I need you to come hang out with me. Like, just kick it with me. This is a weird scene, and I'm just not. I'm hiding behind the camera, and I'm not really talking to anybody. So he came out, and even though I was happy, I was dating this woman that I had a pretty decent relationship at the time with, and then had somebody like Zach, somebody who understood where I was at emotionally. There was something inside me that was felt like I was being called to something. I just didn't know what that calling was, but it was deep down inside. It was driving me crazy, and I just knew that I needed to do something. I just didn't know what it was. So Zach came to the bar and we hung out, and I told him about this thing that was gnawing at me. And as I was describing it to him, I talked about this journey that I had gone on 4 years previously before I had met him, where I was a cameraman and a production assistant for a documentary that followed a group of people that walked from Phoenix, Arizona to Washington, D.C.
Wow.
It was a group of progressive Christians that excuse me, as a group of progressive Christians that they didn't want to go and just like spread their theology. They wanted to find people that vehemently disagreed with them. And then, okay, we disagree with each other on these things about sexuality and civil rights and other faiths. But let's see where we do agree, and then we'll build a positive relationship from there. Like that was their intention. It didn't really go like that. It was more of like speaking to the choir, literally. But I was turned on by that walk, even though I'm not a Christian. I just felt like that the philosophy and the ideas I resonated with. I needed to change something in my life at that time period back in 2006. So I did this walk across the country, and I'm telling Zach about it in 2010 and how it just changed my life, and I wanted to do something else. And he's like, well, I think we should do something. And I was like, yeah, I think you're right. We came together for a reason. He's all like, I wouldn't want to walk across the country, but I would ride my bike across the country. I was like, yeah. He's like, hey, I think we should do it for our brothers. I was like, that's a brilliant idea. I don't know why I didn't think of that myself. So we just decided to like ride our bikes across the country. And I just found it like fitting that two survivors it's two suicide loss survivors discussed the idea of riding their bicycles cross country for suicide awareness while at a suicide girls community party. It was just all these like kind of like little what Terrence McKenna would call cosmic giggles that were just I couldn't deny it. And about 6 months later is when we made the decision, okay, we're going to do this. And it took about 13 months to put it all together, organize it, do the cold calls, call different crisis centers across the country, build a relationship and a partnership with the crisis center locally in Phoenix, create the route, do fundraising projects, get all of our gear. And then it was 7 months of life on the road.
Wow, 7 months. Oh, that's
We had a support vehicle, so it's not as crazy as it sounds. But I mean, the support vehicle was in case somebody got injured, which was helpful because Zach did have like a back injury from North Carolina until about Philly. So I was doing the riding every single day from Charlotte, North Carolina, all the way up to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So, but it was an extraordinary experience that, by the time we had started, I had already come to terms with my trauma and my grief of losing my brother, but I was really interested in how other people, like what their story was like, what was their relationship like with their loved one that they lost. How did relationships change after they suffered that trauma and experienced that grief? And how the community treated them as an individual, because suicide has a strong taboo connected to it. And I also wanted to learn like what people did to navigate their trauma and how to transcend that. And along the way, we met extraordinary activists, therapists, people who had just survivors who had lost loved ones, and lawmakers. And I think above all, one of the things that I learned was not only from the people that I met, but I learned what happiness means to me and how what I should do in order, to live a more fulfilled life. So it really kind of like opened me up, and it was a very eye-opening experience, and helped me cultivate self-awareness.
That's great. And a couple of things that you brought up, and perhaps we can talk about both, because we're talking about suicide awareness, all right? And obviously, and I don't know, how young you were or any of that, or if you really had an understanding of what happened to your brother and ultimately what caused that to occur. I just lost a nephew last month to suicide. So,
I'm sorry to hear that.
He left 3 daughters, younger daughters. And so, I think about them also and as you were talking, and think about how do we overcome, or how do we get past those emotions that are going to live with us, obviously, for a tremendous amount of time, our whole lifetime. But how do we get to the point where it's not affecting us emotionally, and yet we still are honoring that individual and recognizing what happened? So from a standpoint of suicide prevention, what have you learned, or is that really an area that you got into?
Well, I mean, I think when it comes to any type of loss, suicides is more confusing. Like, it hurts when you lose a loved one. They die in a car accident, they die from a disease. Suicide's a little bit more confusing because there could be a lot of anger, and you're angry towards the person that's gone. So it's a lot of different emotions. I apologize. Sorry.
Oh, no problem.
But I think one of the best things that you could do is just sit with somebody who's grieving. Don't ask, what can I do? To me, what can I do is as as meaningless as thoughts and prayers. It doesn't do anything. It kind of like absolves the person from having like, hey, I'm putting in, I'm thinking about you. But I think like the biggest thing you can do for anybody that is grieving, you just show up. If you ask them, what can I do for you? They're not in any particular state of mind to give you direction on how to take care of them. Show up. If they ask you to leave, then leave. And then maybe show up again a week later, but show up. Uh, Bring them some food, encourage them to eat. Ask if you can help them clean their house while you're there, help them with laundry. It's all these things that when you're in the midst of this crisis, the day-to-day things that you have to do in order to survive as a human being, you're not in that. You're in a storm, and it's helpful for people to just show up, and even if they just listen to you talk incoherently, there's nothing you can say that's going to take away a person's pain. So
that's
just
so
sit there and listen. It doesn't matter if it makes sense. It doesn't have to. They like emotion is void of logic most of the time. So and especially when it's a traumatic emotion, it's chaos. So just be there and sit with them and be the calmness within the chaos, and hold their hand, listen to them cry, maybe help them clean up, and say, hey, you go to sleep, or you take a nap, or you just lay there and scream and stare at the ceiling. I'm going to do your dishes.
Well, and on your journey, as you met with these different people who had someone and had a loved one take their life, my question is, did you discover that many developed some sense of guilt and so forth about why would I let that happen? Or, I mean, does that tend to be part of what can happen for some people, that they really take that internally and feel some type of responsibility when in fact they probably have no responsibility at all?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's going to go through it. It's the woulda, coulda, shoulda's trap that people find themselves in, and you just need to throw that woulda, coulda, shoulda into the garbage, because the only thing that you need to concentrate on is what is. That's all. And what is that person's gone. You can't go back in time and change things. All right. The woulda, coulda, shouldas is a form of self-torment, and it doesn't serve you in the end. Go ahead.
Yeah. Now, how old was your brother when
My
he passed
brother,
away?
my brother was 29 years old. He was 2 weeks before his 30th birthday, and I was 24.
And so and I know that because we just went through this with my family. As you went on that journey, which when you talk about suicide prevention, we're talking about how do we as individuals, as family members, as friends, and so forth, how do we help someone who may be contemplating that, and how do we help those to really not get in that position of considering it? Is that something you got into at all on your journey and understanding?
Well, there's a couple layers of that. If you're somebody that lost somebody to suicide, and I'm thinking of your nephew's 3 children, there's a saying that prevention for the next postvention is the prevention for the next generation. So if you lost someone to suicide, getting therapy, either one-on-one or a support group in a group setting, is paramount. Being around people that have the same experience, I don't think you should force anybody into that, but they need to know that it's an option, and they should be encouraged to do it. In terms of if somebody is in crisis, I think that's still a big question, even for people who work in prevention and awareness. a person has to be willing to help themselves. It helps to have a good circle of a good strong circle of influence around you, people that love you, people that are willing to help you, but you also have to be willing to walk through that door. You can't force somebody to walk through a door if they are in crisis. There's 988 is the phone number that you can text or call. If you're worried about somebody and they're not making the phone call or they're not making that text message, I encourage any listener that knows somebody that is struggling to call that number and get information and get as much, find all the tools that they have available to themselves in their community. When it comes to something that I learned about myself and that I've noticed, not only on the bike ride, I've come to this understanding about the importance of self-awareness and awareness in the realm of mental health. Self-awareness isn't encouraged in our society for our citizens. It's not encouraged at all. Imagine if there was a class that we had when we started in kindergarten that was like every other class that just built on itself, but it was a class that helped you that helped you learn yourself, and also provided different tools of stress reduction, whether it's through meditation, through breathing meditation, through thought meditation, through moving meditation, through art meditation, all the different forms. To me, I feel like it was the lack of self-awareness that was the nail in the coffin for my brother. If you don't know who you are, you don't know what you want in this world. If you don't know who you are, there's an entire world telling you and demanding who you should be.
Well, and I think you've hit it on the head. When you think about that, to be able to start at an early age and really help them to develop that self-awareness, that self-discovery, trying to figure out and understanding potentially what their purpose is and so forth, that makes such a huge difference. Because if that's not happening, then what happens, and I have some experience with this, is that they get to a point where that emotional is so tough on them that, as they get to a point where they just don't know whether it's worth it. But then oftentimes they get put on medication because of that. And in some cases, the result and the side effect of that medication is that they take their own life. And that has been shown now scientifically over a number of years. And in fact, a number of years ago, that finally came out. After some people have experienced that. So how do we start as parents? How do we start as individuals to help our young people as well as ourselves and others to start really doing that self-awareness, that self-discovery, and really get to the point where when issues come up, they have the ability to handle that in a different way?
The different self-awareness is like a very vast, because like one of the, I use it. My cultivation of self-awareness has not only helped me to learn what I love in life and what I'm passionate about life and what I want to do with my life, but it also helps me when I'm in the presence of somebody who's really difficult. My body will tell me before my mind does. Like when I'm working at the library and I just have this kind of like expectation that's the job that I have, or the day job, all this other stuff, the passion that I have, in the rest of the world, that I do outside of work. But the library to me I'm very passionate about as well, because it's the last place in our society that you can go to without the expectation of spending money. And we're a bridge for a lot of people that are in crisis. But when I'm at the library and I'm working the front desk, and we get some interesting characters, we get some, like, you wouldn't expect the level of difficulty that we get from somebody that isn't even in crisis. So you kind of like have this expectation that like, oh, I'm going to deal with some troublesome individuals today. So you know that going in when you go to a service point. But for me, it's like, even though I have that expectation up in my head, it's not until my body starts to like give me these tells that, okay, this person is actually on my nerves. It comes in like a tightness of the chest, the heart palpitation, sweaty palms, my knee is bouncing. So it's just like, I feel like self-awareness not only can help you with your purpose, but it helps you to understand your body and how you're responding to any situation. Now that I got that out of the way, how do we encourage that? That's an even bigger question, because most people don't go on a journey of self-awareness unless they've, one, suffered a trauma and are grieving, or they need a humanities credit to get their degree, and they wander into a Eastern philosophy class in college and their mind is blown. And the thing about self-awareness, it's like any other skill. Some people are born with an innate deep understanding of who they are, separate from every institution in their community that they've been influenced by. Just like some people are born and they can shoot a basketball really well. But if you're one of those individuals that hasn't been born with that, you can cultivate it just like you can cultivate a jump shot if you don't have that innate talent. And I think it starts with just having like a meditation practice, but also understanding what meditation is. It's not about clearing the mind. It's about understanding the garbage that's in your head. It's about understanding and focusing on your body and where you hold tension. It's about understanding your body, and that's, to me, was like one of the first things that I was taught, was doing a breathing meditation, while also starting at my toes and going all the way up to my head and then back down to my toes, and recognizing where I'm holding tension. And the more and more you do that, you start to you don't even have to be in a meditative state to recognize tension. It could be a situation, and you're like, uh-oh, like I'm nervous or I'm upset, and it's because of what's happening. And it may not even be a situation that like is blatantly stressful, but your body is going to let you know how you're responding to it. I think literature is another good place to start. Like everybody's going to find their literary teachers. My big one, I'm a big Alan Watts fan, even though I do realize he's a bit of a drunk and maybe a hash head, but the stuff, it's the lessons, not the teacher, or it's the message, not the deliverer. Not the message, not the messenger. Sorry. Alan Watts was big for me. I really enjoy Thich Nhat Hanh and some of the stuff that he writes about. But the biggest thing for me, and this might be surprising to some people, and it shows up in my book. I am a big nerd, and I am a passionate fan of story and storytelling. So before I go on, another author, which I came to before the bike ride, that I find as a teacher, is Joseph Campbell, the mythologist. And so those literary, Thich Nhat Hanh, Alan Watts, and Joseph Campbell are probably the biggest ones. But outside of them, I love storytelling. It doesn't not even matter how commercial a story may be, whether it's a book, it's music, or a movie. You cannot not tell the human story, the human condition, in any type of story. How is that possible? Because all stories are written from humans, from human experience.
That's
So
right.
so like what forms of storytelling are you consuming, and why? Why do you watch this television show? Why do you watch this movie series? Like, what is it about? Why do you listen to this music? If you're just into it because you like the sound of the music, that's one thing, but there's still a story being told in the sound outside of the lyrics. Why do you like this music? Is it because of the lyrics? Is a story being told? Why does that resonate with you? Is it resonating with you because you have a lived experience, or it's something that you aspire to live up to in an archetypical sense? Or is it just something like everybody else is listening to it, and that's why I'm doing it, and I'm going along with the crowd so I can have something to talk about, in the office water cooler conversation?
Well, and you talk, I know on your website, you talk about, this is one thing that just hit me real fast when I looked at it. Mental health equals mindfulness.
Begins with mindfulness, yeah.
And that's what you're really talking about, is that we have to be so mindful, aware of what's going on subconsciously and what's around us, that we recognize how that can or cannot affect our emotional health.
Yeah.
And I know you talk about the 4 C's that you, I assume, have developed. Can you share with the audience what those 4 C's are?
It's been a long time since I've talked about that. So, community, what was it?
Community, collaboration, creativity, and compassion.
Yeah. Thank you. I've been on I've been on the awareness thing. I think the 4 C's is just, it's a no-brainer. Art and creativity. A society that is thriving is one that supports the arts. All right. One of my favorite quotes comes from Terence McKenna, where he says that, now it just left me. It's like I have so much information in my head. Sometimes I just have to calm down and breathe. Art's task is to save the soul of mankind, and anything less is a dithering while Rome burns. It is the artists who are self-selected to journey into the other. So if the artist cannot find the way, then the way cannot be found. It takes a creative mind to solve complex problems. All right, so that's like the 4 C's. That's one of like the biggest ones, is that we need to be able to think differently about issues that we're dealing with. Community, you shouldn't be the only person that's doing it by yourself. You need to have people around you, and a part of community is to be able to collaborate. In collaboration, you also have to realize that you have to sacrifice sometimes. There's a give and take in working with a community. I think a strong community is one that's filled with individuals that understand who they are and what they want in this world.
And that brings about compassion, doesn't it?
Yeah, and compassion.
Naturally.
And with compassion, that kind of goes to, I have 3, and this is why I kind of stalled on the 4 C's, because I've really been talking about, especially with my book, the awareness. And I don't really just talk about it in the book as much. It's kind of like an echo in the background. But I'm sure anybody can break this down into different ways that they want, but I break down awareness into 3 forms. You have self-awareness, spatial awareness, and social awareness. And social awareness is what cultivates compassion and empathy, which is important if we're going to work together in a community to solve problems. And the idea of social awareness is understanding what paradigm other people live in. My view of reality is funneled through the filter of a white heterosexual male. That's how my reality is filtered through me. If I want to learn about even just a white female, I need, my compassion and my empathy is only going to take me so far. But I need to be willing to go as far as I can and push that limit. I can't know their experience because I am not of that ilk. I'm not going to know what it's like to be a person of color or a person of different sexual orientation, because I don't live in that meat sack of reality. And I don't have that filter. But if I want to grow as an individual, if I want to expand my compassion, then I need to have that awareness to understand that I don't know that person's lived experience, But in order to be a better, a healthier person, not only for myself, but for my circle of influence, for the community that I'm within, I need to at least take the steps to understand and learn this other individual's experience and existence in this world.
And you know what? That in my mind, that is so important. And I've had that experience. It's been interesting as I've interviewed different people from different cultures, from
Yeah.
different ethnic groups. It's amazing as we talk, and sometimes we do this after we've videotaped everything. But but it's interesting to realize that, here we sit in our own lives, as you say, we have our own perception, our own experience, and we don't understand what's going on there. And oftentimes the lack of understanding causes us to, quite frankly, be a little bit prejudiced towards something,
Mhm.
or angry towards something, or unforgiving, or whatever that happens to be. But at least in my experience, the minute you do exactly what you're talking about and you reach out and you seek to understand, and it's not that you have to agree, but to seek to understand what they're going through and potentially emotions and all these things they're going through, all of a sudden is like, holy cow, I had no idea. And you're right, what that brings about is a sense of compassion for others
Mhm.
that oftentimes we don't have.
I when I was shooting the documentary about the group of Christians, there was this bishop that walked with us on the tail end of a tropical storm as we were walking into Washington D.C. And I remember having my camera, like I duct taped a garbage bag around the lens so that the camera was in a plastic case, and I was just holding the camera, and I was having a conversation with this bishop, and I was just, I hit record, and he just shared with me. He's like, I had to change my theology. The civil rights movement and meeting people that were a part of that helped me cured me of my racism. Raising daughters cured me of my sexism, and working with people of different sexual orientation cured me of my bigotry of the LGBT community. And I think that that's just important if we're going to get along. It's easy to just not like something because it's different. It's so easy. It's so easy. I mean, my first my first reaction, I mean, I think of myself as a horrible person. My first reaction when I meet anybody is like, who's this a-hole? Yeah, like that's usually my first reaction. It's just like this weird defense mechanism within me. And I understand that, like, you know, on an animalistic level, the human animal looks at every situation and says, can I eat it? Can I have sex with it? Or is it a threat to me and I need to run away? And like that's like outside of like learning language, our base impulsives hasn't really changed much in our evolutionary spectrum. So I just like understand it, like that's me just being a jerk. And it's not, and I always, I have that first reaction, but then I tell myself, okay, that's just your alarm system. That's your overtly sensitive alarm system. This, you like this guy has a better beard than you, and you're just being a jerk.
and
So
and that's where your mindfulness comes in, isn't it?
yeah, yeah,
And
and
go ahead.
it's just something that, like, it would never hurt us to pay a little bit more attention to our thoughts and understand why we have those thoughts. Like, I think, who am I outside of what society tells me I should be is probably, and I can't, I say it in my book, like the fact that we don't have that our educational institutions don't teach self-awareness to us as a society is either it's only there's only two reasons why it could be. It's either negligence or it's nefarious. There's no other reason why they wouldn't be teaching that. Either the people who write the policies just aren't thinking of it, which I think it's probably more inclined that it's just negligence. Or there's like a sinister, it's easier to manipulate people when they don't have a sense of self.
or they just do not get it.
And that's what I
They-
mean, negligence.
yeah,
They just don't
they just don't get it. Well, and as we come to the end of the conversation, what would be the message that you really would like to share with the audience?
your one true job on this planet is to understand who you are and what you're about and why you do the things and believe the things that you believe. Because it doesn't matter how much you alienate yourself from the rest of the world, you are going to be stuck with one person from cradle to grave, and that's you. So you better get comfortable and learn everything you can about yourself.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Thomas, this has been interesting. And, I really appreciate the fact that you've been so transparent because obviously suicide is such a difficult thing to deal with. And
Yes, it
society
is.
has kind of been real nervous about it and trying to create words that are not going to be offensive. But the reality is, and as we talk about compassion, to be able to understand what's going on, to be able to in some way work towards that prevention. And then what you've experienced, and I think part of what your book is all about, is to be able to help those people who have experienced that trauma in their life to be able to ultimately work through it to the point where it's not affecting them negatively anymore in their lives. So that, as you say, they can move on, they can find their own self, their inner purpose, and really move forward without not letting it totally affect them. Memory's never going to be gone, never going to be gone. But to be able to get to the point where you look at it and go, all right, I'm going to do something about it for the future generations. And I think you hit on the good point is all we can do with these experiences is what can we do to help prevent this any further in our generations? And I think that becomes the key. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Doug.
Well, and I really appreciate what you were willing to share with us. And folks, I hope this has made a difference for you. And again, it's 988, right? That people should call
988. Yeah.
if
988.
there's an issue. And
They can
so,
call or text.
yeah, please be aware and let's see if we can't help our society and our culture to be able to literally help start preventing this horrific situation that goes on. So this is Dr. Doug saying, have a wonderful week and namaste.